It was just about a year ago that President Joachim Gauck said that some saw Germany as a shirker in the international community. He said the country was perceived as using its past as a way of avoiding tough diplomatic choices.
The Foreign Minister, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, described the past year as presenting the country with a harsh reality. He said there have recently been unprecedented challenges for German foreign policy.
Germany has recently been directly involved in crisis talks in Ukraine and economic negotiations in Greece. So what has brought the country to get stuck in and push for changes, rather than simply mediate?
To provide us with an insight into Germany's new foreign policy outlook is the Wall Street Journal's Berlin correspondent, Anton Troianovski. So, Anton, could you describe Germany's approach to foreign policy, diplomacy, and military until now?
Well, since the reunification in the early 1990s, Germany has really, in many ways, held back internationally and sought to kind of be in the second row behind, let's say, Paris and London in leading European foreign policy. There's been kind of a continuous attempt, you might say, by German leaders, supported by the German public, to kind of avoid sticking your neck out on tricky political situations. Probably one of the first big shifts came in the run-up to the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, when Germany and then Chancellor Gerhard Schröder kind of led the opposition to, or helped lead the opposition to, the Iraq War. That was kind of one of the first times that Germany post-reunification took a strong stance. But that, too, was driven out of this idea of better not to get involved internationally, better to hold back, better to avoid intervention, certainly military intervention. And you for a long time saw German foreign policy be really driven by economic interests. The idea that Germany can best further democratic values in other parts of the world by increasing, economic interdependence. You've seen that from Russia to Latin America to other parts of the world. And in the last year, and this is, I guess, what we're going to talk about, in the last year, you've really seen some changes on several levels there.
So maybe you could give us a rundown of what changes have happened over the past year.
Well, the biggest and external shock to Germany, obviously, has been the Ukraine crisis. It's just really shocked people that you could have this kind of violent conflict so close to Germany. And it's put an end to the belief among many that international borders can't be altered by force anymore in Europe. So that was the big external shock. But in the background, you had German leaders starting to recognize that Germany, because of its economic primacy in Europe, also has a foreign policy responsibility. And the thing there is that the German economy obviously withstood the Euro crisis far better than any other major European country. And that left Germany in this unprecedented position of economic power in Europe that German leaders started to recognize as also being something that they should translate politically. And so we've seen sort of a coincidence of different things here. A year ago at the Munich Security Conference, President Joachim Gauck spoke about Germany's need to take on more responsibility. The Foreign Minister, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, has been saying similar things. So you've had this external shock of the Ukraine crisis combined with German recognition, at least in the political elites, of the need to take on more responsibility. That's led to this shift that we're now seeing become more and more concrete.
So there's now the question of how far will or should Germany take this new role? So should they put their mark on the world as the United States has done in its foreign policy? Some have said, should it go as far to try and Europeanize Russia, for example? Should it really put its mark on the world, or should it be more careful? Well, first of all, should and will. What will it do?
Well, I mean, let's first look at what Germany has actually done, what has actually changed amid that background that we just talked about. So the biggest thing I think that Germany has done in the last year is take the central role among Western countries taking on Russia over Ukraine. So that's been something where Germany, I think, recognized, and Chancellor Merkel's government recognized that it had the most potential influence on Russia, and so was willing to kind of stick its neck out there in a way that we haven't really seen Germany do on the international stage much before. Also, though, a part of international responsibility, the way that German leaders have defined it, is the military and security aspect. And there, Germany has been criticized for years by the U.S. and other NATO allies for sort of not pulling its weight militarily and kind of relying on the protective umbrella of the U.S. to guarantee its security. So there, what we're starting to see happen is German politicians talking more seriously than really at any point since reunification about strengthening and even expanding the military. The most direct example of that is probably the fact that in the Cold War, West Germany had 2,125 Leopard 2 battle tanks made for it. The plan, as the military has been shrinking in order to cut costs, was to bring that number of 2,000 down to just 225 tanks. And recently, in late February, Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen announced that they were going to put a stop to that shrinkage and reevaluate how many tanks they actually needed. So you've seen, this notion of German responsibility carry through certainly into the diplomatic sphere via Russia, but also into the military sphere. And so to get to your question on how far will Germany take this, a big part of this is how much is going to be politically viable, because as you know, the German population is really one of the most pacifist out there. Anything that smacks of military engagement, a rearmament would not go down well with very large swaths of the population. So that's going to be one issue. And the other one is, I think, you constantly hear the Germans say, we want to, if we're going to take a greater role internationally, we want to do it with our European partners, with international partners. So I don't think you can expect Germany to take a U.S.-style kind of a unilateral role in really any international conflicts or crises.
So you mentioned that Germany is an extremely pacifist country. What do Germans think about this new role of more proactive foreign policy?
It's very difficult and it's a very sensitive topic among German voters. There's been some interesting polling conducted on this. There was one from the Kerber Foundation that asked Germans last year whether they wanted their country to take on greater responsibility in international crises, and a lot of them said, no. In fact, it was 60% that said in 2014 Germany should hold back. And only 37% said Germany should get involved more strongly. And then something even more interesting is that this same poll was conducted earlier this year, and the same question was asked after this year of real German engagement internationally, and that number actually went back even further. You had a slight downtick of Germans who were saying the country should engage itself more strongly. But I think if you present at the same time, if you present Germans with sort of specific facts of a specific situation, they are going to be willing to approve of things. And the most dramatic example of that in the last year has been the delivery of weapons to the Kurds fighting Islamic State in the Middle East. That was an unheard of step for Germany to send weapons into a war zone, one that took a lot of convincing on the part of Merkel's government. But in the end, they did it. In the end, we see Merkel and Steinmeier remain extremely popular in the German public. So it looks like for now, the German public is willing to support this limited, careful expansion of German international engagement. But again, if we see anything unilateral, if we see anything that smacks of warmongering, I think you can expect very strong protests from a large portion of Germans.
Anton Troianovski, Berlin correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, thank you very much for joining us here on This Week in Germany.
Sure thing. My pleasure.
If you'd like to follow Anton on Twitter, you can find him at AntonWSJ.